Hey up everybody, and welcome back to the Audio Cycling YouTube channel, where today we're going to be taking a look at Tirreno Adriatico. It's one of the best times of the year, this, as a cycling fan, because you get Paris-Nice and Tirreno Adriatico at the same time. Obviously Tirreno starts on Monday, so be sure to get your teams in for then. We're going to take a look at some of the stage profiles and also some of the riders, and also great opportunity now that we're at the start of the Stage Race Championship to go and order a wall chart if you haven't got one already for the Stage Race Championship, because of course Paris and Tirreno are the first two on there, and we'll go through into Catalonia, Basque Country, Romandy, etc, plus all the Grand Tours are on there as well, so be sure to go and check the link in the description if you haven't got yours already. But let's go take a look at the stage profiles. We have 7 stages in Tirreno Adriatico this year, starting off with a very traditional flat time trial. Stage 2 looks like it should be a sprint. Stage 3, although this is a HC category climb, upon closer inspection, yes, the first kilometre is of 1.6 kilometres is very tricky at 1.9%. This middle section is actually like 2%, basically flat for these guys for the speed they'll be going at. You know, there's going to be a lot of drafting still, and then the last 6k averages 4% and a little descent. So I think this is a really interesting stage, and I think it's going to be borderline for some of the kind of hardier sprinters. You know, you guys like Michael Matthews or Magnus Cort Nielsen will be really relishing this, but maybe somebody like Milan, it's a little bit more borderline. We'll certainly get into that discussion in a little bit with regards to his price. Stage 4, also interesting in that I think this could be one for the breakaway, just because of the amount of climbing meters in there, and then a big descent, and then you've only got another like hour or so of racing on the flat to try and catch the breakaway. And it's going to be a matter of who's going to want to chase over this sort of distance. It's also worth noting this stage prior was 240 kilometres, so pretty serious. This one I think could go to the breakaway. If not, it will be a reduced sprint amongst sprinters who can climb really well, like a Michael Matthews or Magnus Cort Nielsen. Stage 5, and I think we've honestly got our first actual GC day, which includes these 2 shorter climbs towards the finish, but we've got some steeper gradients in there, so that should be either some sort of attacks going on here, and maybe somebody goes solo because there's a pretty steep descent off of that. So that's how I see that going. Stage 6 is the only real pure summit finish of the whole week. 7.6 kilometers at 7.9%. So that's where pretty much most of the GC will be decided upon that climb. And then stage 7 is going to be a sprint. So you've got kind of 2 nailed on sprints, a time trial, a potential sprint on stage 3, a breakaway day, which is going to be a little bit hard to predict, and then you got like 2 GC days pretty much. Going into the riders, you got Ayuso, who's 24 credits. I think Ayuso is a good choice. He's very safe because he can time trial very well. I mean, didn't he win the time trial last year? I think he did. And then he can also sprint pretty well. He's obviously in good form because he won Trofeo La Guelia. You know, he won the Phone Drone Classic as well. So I think Ayuso is really good. I would say that you should all be picking Ayuso, to be honest with you. Even if he is 24 credits, I think that he covers a lot of bases. You know, he can do well on a lot of these stages, and I think that's really good. And I think that's really the key for Tirreno this year, is to trying to find those riders who can do well over multiple terrains, because if you pick just like a sprinter, like a pure sprinter, they'll only be able to do 2 stages, but if you pick a more versatile sprinter, they could do a bit more. Yates, honestly, I don't think is worth it, considering that when you look at the stage profiles, I only really see Yates doing something maybe on stage 5 and 6, by which point, 4 stages have gone. He's not going to have accumulated any points realistically in a lot of these stages, and for a guy who's 22 credits, you're banking a lot on him doing well in these just 2 stages and then overall final GC. And I just think that Ayuso for 2 extra credits has a better TT and a bit of a better sprint maybe for stage 3. So I'd say that I wouldn't be choosing Yates. I think he's just too, he's a great climber, but I just don't think this race is orientated towards that. Milan, he is very interesting in that he was 3rd in the TT last year. I think it was a little bit shorter at 10Ks, not 12. And Milan, yeah, his TTs can be a little bit hit and miss. That the one last year was an absolute like hit. And can Milan, if he does well in the TT, this stage 2, can he survive stage 3? He'll do well in stage 7, but can he survive stage 3? That's really the crux of it. Because if he doesn't, I'm not sure if he's going to be that great value for money. But if he does, I think that he will be. So that really depends on what you think. Can Ganna survive this 18 kilometer 3% average climb? I kind of think he does, because he does seem to climb very well. So I think that Milan is a good choice. Even if he's not the best value for money, I think that he provides such a certainty for the sprints that you almost have to pick him for that. And I think this is a race where there's not going to be loads of brilliant value for money picks, just because of the nature of how the stages are set up, and that it doesn't favour one type of rider for the whole race. It's always chopping and changing. Bilbao, he was good in Stradé, 5th place. And I think that he's a good certainty for a top 10. Godu crashed in Stradé, so I don't know how he's going. I'd probably try and look up a bit more about him to see how he's going. But in theory, maybe not the best choice after that crash, considering that the crash forced him to DNF as well. That certainly doesn't help. Hindley, a little bit unknown, but he tends to do pretty well in this race. He was 3rd last year. But again, very limited to stages 5 and 6 to get your points. So a little bit limiting in that regard. Pidcock, I'd say, is a little bit better because he was 2nd today in Stradé, and he also has a good sprint. So on that stage 3, was it? Stage 3, stage 4? Stage 3 of this climb. I think that Pidcock will be pretty good there, sprinting for a good position, because this is great Milano Sanremo training. So I think Pidcock's good. I'd say he's better than Simon Yates is, because Simon Yates, yes, he can do some good TTs, but they generally happen on hillier terrain TTs, like at least a little bit rolly, not pan flat. Pidcock, I think, just has that versatility of being able to sprint at the end, which Hindley and Yates and Godu don't particularly have. So I'd say Pidcock's my favourite, but the other 3 are still okay choices for a top 10. It's just that might not get you loads of points in the grand scheme of things. The 14 credit riders, again, quite a mixed bag. You've got Carapaz. He was talking up his game a lot for Strade Bianchi, and then he didn't really do much, so I'm not really too willing to back him. Del Toro, I think he'll just be domestiquing for Ayuso and Yates, but saying that last year he did finish 4th place just by doing that, and I got him a lot of points, but he was also 10 credits last year, so make of that what you will. I think Del Toro is still a decent choice, but probably not better than, say, Derek G. I think G would do a better time trial and be the absolute leader for Israel Premier Tech, so therefore is more certain to get those GC points than Del Toro, because you're relying on Del Toro being so strong that he drops Derek G whilst Derek G is being protected. So I'd probably go, G's a good one. And then you've got like Van Hills is an interesting one as well. He can't time trial that well, but that stage 5 and 6 should be pretty good for him. But they've also got Hindley, so neither of them particularly great choices in my eyes, just because they don't have that time trialing edge in there as well. But I guess Van Hills has a decent sprint, so maybe on that stage 3 he could be pretty competitive there. The other ones are all sprinters of some sort. You've got Binny, Olav Koy and Matthew van der Poel. I'll say Van der Poel to the end. Binny and Olav Koy, they're fine. Binny a little bit better because he could do stage 3, so he gets free sprinting opportunities, and maybe that breakaway day, depending how that goes, maybe he could do something there. So Binny I like. Coy has been ill, doesn't have that great of a lead out train here. In fact, he's only really got like 2 riders to lead him out in Van Baarle and Dan McClay, so I'm not overly confident with that, but in theory he is the 2nd fastest sprinter in the race behind Milan, so he should be picking up some decent points. I just think that I don't think he'll survive stage 3, whereas I think Binny could, so I'd say that Binny's better value. Now, Van der Poel is even more interesting because he will do a good TT, of course, because he was in fantastic form, as proven by Le Samin the other day, where he dusted everybody. And he'll do well in stage 3, but will he compete for the sprints? Because if he doesn't, then he's not worthwhile picking, but if he does, then he will be worthwhile picking, and that is a really hard thing to predict. Generally, Van der Poel doesn't get involved in bunch sprints, but that doesn't mean that this won't be the case because, like this time around, because there's no Philipsen and there's no Kois, so he might well do. You'll have to just let me know what you think in the comments. The 12 credit riders, you've got a lot of versatility here. Ciccone obviously was second place in UAE Tour, but again, limited to those 2 GC days on 5 and 6. De Plus kind of similarly, but has a slightly better TT than Ciccone. Although saying that, Ciccone did a great TT in the UAE Tour, which is very similar to this one. Similar length, similar kind of profile. Ganna I like just because he could win the opening TT. Maybe he might go up against Van der Poel and Milan for that, and maybe a Yuzo. But I think Ganna is one of the favourites to win the TT. He can climb pretty well, so I think he might survive stage 3 as well. And he might get involved in the sprints. Sometimes he does, sometimes he doesn't. It's hard to tell, but with the daily GC points, he might get up to 300 points, even without any sort of, final GC points in there. So I quite like Ganna just for the certainty of get the TT points and just get some points after that, and then he'll just drop like a stone in the mountains. Gregoire wasn't that great in Strade Bianche today. For saying that, he does a good time trial. He can climb well as well. So I think that Gregoire is actually pretty good because he fulfills quite a few of those stages. Certainly stages, 1, 3, 5 and 6, so that's quite good. Groenewegen I wouldn't pick. He can only compete in 2 stages. I don't really like that. Landa kind of similarly, although he was good in Strade today. I think he was 11th, better than I was expecting. But he is just limited in his point scoring ability, kind of like a lot of the other pure climbers. Magnier I do like because he did a decent TT in the under 23 Giro last year. I think he was 4th over a 8-kilometer time trial. Even if he doesn't do miraculously, he'll still get involved in a bunch of sprints and he should survive stage 3, and he climbs pretty well when maybe even like stage 5 might not be out of the question. Based upon how he's been climbing this year, I'd say Magnier is a really good shout. I know the Italian sniper is here. He's a decent choice because he can time trial and climb. Moving on. Ita Brooks I wouldn't pick because he can't time trial, and I don't know if he's the leader for the team. Vauquelin's in good form, and he's kind of similar to Tiberi, where he can time trial and climb, so therefore is automatically a good pick in this race. The 10 credit riders, sprinters, Ackermann, Bennett, Kort Nielsen, although there is also Valenshold here, so worthwhile kind of thinking about who they're actually going to sprint for. It should be Valenshold in reality. Penoe, the aforementioned Valenshold is here. He's actually quite a good choice because he can time trial, so a top 10 in that first TT plus a couple of sprints is pretty good. Kort Nielsen I like just because I think he could do decently in GC, I reckon he could. He's been in miraculous form, so why not? And other than that, you've just got a real mixed bag of like slightly random GC prospects like Dunbar, Fortunato, Guerrero. Healy was good today in Strade Bianche, 4th place, but he never tends to do that well in GC for some reason. I don't really know why. Hershey didn't do that great today either, and therefore I'm apprehensive to pick him here. Jonas Agir, Harland Johannesson, Kwiatkowski crashed pretty bad as well. Valentin Padapenta possibly, although his time trialing really isn't that great at all. He could be alright for the GC. And Piganzoli actually does a good time trial, as proven in O Gran Camino. And he climbs pretty well too. So Piganzoli for a top 10, Max Poole as well, could be alright. So you just got a lot of these climbers who you just have to kind of look at their form and just hope that they finish slightly better than some of their other pure climbing counterparts, like Valentin Padapenta or Piganzoli. I'd say are some of the safer GC guys from this selection. Fortunato as well, he's been in good form, but again his time trialing really stinks, so how's he going to go there? And then the other sprinters, you're really relying on them surviving some of the slightly tougher stages to be worthwhile. So that's my take on the 10 credit riders. The 8s, Berthe possibly could be an okay choice. He was good in the Ruta del Sol and Classica HN, so he's got some good form clearly. Bettiol was good in La Guelia. He could do a decent time trial. He might sprint maybe. Like that stage 3 is very suited to him. Stage 5 he could do okay. So Bettiol could certainly be a worthwhile one to consider. Cockard as well. Gets involved in a bunch of sprints, and stage 3 should be within his capabilities, so I like him. Lonardi kind of similarly. He can climb pretty well. Maybe not well enough for stage 3, so it's a little bit of a grey area. Moschetti, very limited to just those 2 pure sprints. Ploymers is again a little bit 50-50. Maybe he could survive stage 3. He tends to be quite good at climbing, but maybe on some shorter climbs, so maybe that won't translate into longer climbs. But in theory, he was 5th in Kuurne Brussel Kuurne. He's clearly sprinting very well, and there's no like Ardvid decline here, so I think he should be their sprinter. Casper van Uden as well, sprinting for Picnic Postenel. I think no, Jakobsen's in Paris, isn't he? And yeah, the other ones are just kind of a bit like, you could pick some of these guys for the breakaway, like that stage 4 breakaway, which I'm expecting, like Pasher or Brandon Rivera, Smith or Pelayo Sanchez, Tom Schoins would all be good options for that breakaway, alongside Vesnes, or yeah, actually Bettiol would be good for that as well. But anyway, moving on to the 6 credit riders. Bussato, I'm just a big fan of Bussato. I think he's a cool rider, so I'll just keep shouting his name out. Chavez could be a top 25 for GC. Conchi, he was top 5 in that Tour des Alpes Mountain Team stage 2, so maybe he might do something in this race, I guess. Fiorelli, maybe he gets involved in some breakaways in the sprints. Gudmestad, there is Bennett here, but he is a very fast sprinter, is Gudmestad, so if for some reason Bennett doesn't start, go with Gudmestad for sure. Odne Holter, yeah, he's not a bad shout. Andreas Krohn for that stage 3 would be quite a cool one to be picking. You got lots of guys for breakaway points, like Maestri, for example, or Masnada might get in that breakaway. Zandler Morisa as well, are good ones. I'd say actually Johannes Staunamittad is my favourite 6 credit rider in this race because he's got the best GC credentials and therefore gives the most certainty. Benjamin Thomas for that one opening time trial and then just getting some daily GC points. Valgren, I think he was great in Strade Bianche today. I just don't know which stages really suit him in this race. Maybe if he gets in a breakaway, he could be a really good shout as well. But, he was just in good form, and that tends to lead to just quite good things. So even if not for this race, keep your eye out on him for future races. Tim van Dijker, yes, for that opening TT, quite good. Sometimes gets involved in the sprints, but he's not the fastest sprinter, so you're really relying on that opening TT. Zanicello should be the sprinter for Bardiani, I think, but given the amount of sprinting talent here, he'd be kind of lucky to crack a top 10. For 4 credit riders, I've looked at quite a lot of them. You're really looking at breakaway guys like Davide Bais, would be a good shout. Obviously, he's won a Giro d'Italia stage from a breakaway. Jorge Arjas for Movistar assist points in team classification might not be too bad of a shout to go with. Galglivar, I like. Maybe he gets involved in the sprints if Van der Poel doesn't. Gablag Zabir for the assist points on Milan, which should inevitably come his way. Kajamini is an interesting one I'm looking at. He climbed very well last year in, I want to say it was the Baby Giro, not the Tour de l'Avenir, but I think he climbs surprisingly well, and okay, he might just be a domestique, but at this point you got 4. If you're spending 4 credits, you're in the bargain basement anyway. I'd say that Kajamini is an interesting one. I'd probably say go check out his stats because they're quite good actually, all things considered. Casper Pedersen for assist points on Merlier. Not Merlier. Merlier isn't even here. Magnier, that's the one I meant. But if Magnier doesn't start, Pedersen might sprint. Price Peterson for that opening time trial is probably your safest bet actually out of all these. And honestly, Connor Swift was very good in Strade Bianche and he didn't crash. And I think he looked pretty good in that race. So maybe that could lead to some of the breakaway performances here because Ineos don't have a huge GC prospect in this race, so I would say that they might, like maybe Depluce or Ganna, but I would say they might have some free cards to get in the breakaway, and I think that Connor Swift could be a really interesting one. So Connor Swift, Price Peterson, or just any person who might go in the breakaway would be my recommendations. My team currently looks like this. So I've got Ayuso, Magnier, Ganna, Milan, Vokola, Ploymers, Kajamini, Price Peterson, and Johannes Staun and Mittet. It's a weird one, and it's certainly not. I'm not certain about it because it feels very GC light, but like I mentioned, there's not a lot of GC stages and they're very back heavy, so it doesn't make me want to put on any GC rider who doesn't have any sort of time trialing capabilities. So that pretty much limits me to Ayuso, Gregoire, Taberi, Vokola, pretty much. That's what it limits me to, just because I don't want to put that. I mean, maybe De Plus, actually. So I'm just banking on guys who can do a decent time trial and get involved in multiple stages. That's my mantra for this race, but it's certainly not perfect. So let me know what you're thinking in the comment sections down below. How are you thinking of tackling this Tirreno Adriatico? I think it's a little bit trickier than, say, Paris-Nice, which is very GC heavy, so it makes it a little bit easier just to stack up on GC riders because there's a lot of GC days. So put your teams in the comment section down below, and all that is left to say is to stay safe out there, and I will see you in the next video. Salut.